thanks for tuning in. This channel's just getting started, but we're here with Seth Boester today, who is a music critic.
Is that my title officially now?
No, he's a lot of things, actually.
Speaking into existence, I guess, is what I have to do.
This is Seth Boester. He is he does marketing for plants.
Yeah, plants, fungi occasionally. I dabble in those as well. There's a lot more red tape with fungi because they're not in the same kingdom, but I try to dabble in it when I can because I feel like it's an emerging market, But
of course, yeah. So we just spoke that into existence because that's how things work here.
Yeah, we're all idiots here.
Anyways, let's tell them what you actually do. Tell us a little bit about you, Seth.
Yeah.
Go. And
okay.
About you.
Well, I am, formerly I went to the University of Missouri, was in traditional journalism for a while, and then I saw that industry just slowly light itself on fire. No judgment, but I just realized it wasn't for me. So I switched to strategic communication, which is a very buzzwordy way of saying advertising, public relations, and the like. Makes more money. Still, I don't have a job currently, but hypothetically, I'll be making more money. But in my free time, I still like to talk about music, review music, kind of in a critical sense. I used to do more things on my Facebook and Twitter and stuff, but now I've kind of geared it more towards my Instagram. Actually, I do a thing where this whole entire year I've reviewed an album every single day that I've never heard before. And I try to give my thoughts on it. I give a little bit of a score and some notes and everything, and then I let people rate it themselves. So yeah, that's what I'm currently doing as far as anything remotely professional, in the wake of all that's going on,
How many albums have you listened to so far? I actually don't know the answer to this.
So I mean, we're at the halfway point of the year, so at least 182, right? But I have listened to other ones beyond that because sometimes if I'm really, there are albums that admittedly I'm kind of ashamed of saying that I've never listened to. So a couple of them I'll listen to on my own, and I won't score them or anything. But just
give us one.
Okay. Matt Kirchhoffer is going to kill me if any of you know who that is. I had not listened to Is This It in its entirety up until this year.
Seriously?
Yeah, I had listened to Room on Fire. I had listened to Angles, but had never listened to it. I had listened to Someday and Last Night and the singles, but I never.
Yeah, so has every other 12-year-old girl.
All right, well, thank you. But I mean, yeah, it was if I had reviewed it, it would have been one of the easiest 10s you could give. I mean, it's Baby's first rock album, but in a very good way. It's one of the most easiest to understand albums you could possibly make, I think. Yeah, it really is about as close to perfect as you can make music. But yeah, so stuff like that where I don't want to admit on camera on YouTube that I've never listened to before. But yeah, so
no, that's okay. I think we all have albums there's so much fucking music. There's so many movies. There's so many articles to read, books to read. I mean, you can't hit it all. You have to, how could you appreciate the stuff you have listened to if you
constantly
listening to quantity over quality?
Yeah, exactly.
I'd rather listen to my favorite album 5 times and miss one.
Well, that was the thing for me too, where it was a struggle between I want to at least sound like I know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about stuff because I want people to believe and trust my opinion. But also, there's just some stuff I've never heard before, and so I was like, well, if I can kind of sneak it in over time in my own private listening, and then later on, I actually have the knowledge to talk about it. If I ever go back to doing full-on write-ups on a blog or anything, I will probably do one on the Strokes and talk about specifically how that music is, special in a certain way and how it affected me and all that. So I'm not necessarily ashamed of not saying I've listened to certain stuff or not before, but. I don't know. There's just some things where it's and in the case of Is This It, it's what hasn't been said about that, right? It was the biggest album of rock in 25 years when it came out. So I can't really say much that hasn't been said already.
Right.
So that's also the case too. But
there still is something to be said about your holistic thoughts on an artist's entire library. They're
or how it affects you personally.
Right. So for example, when Anthony Fantano reviews an album, he talks about the artist, their life, the albums before, how they've changed. A big thing for him is obviously and for a lot of reviewers is like how they evolved.
Yeah.
He might do a review on an artist's third album, but he talks like he's listened front and back all the albums before that too.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is like, do you have to go back and do you have to know the entire discography before you can accurately talk about the album you're listening to?
Yeah, it adds consistency, right? I mean, like if you know that Fantano has listened to the previous, 4 Arcade Fire albums, for example, and he knows them, and he loves at least a few of them, and then he goes into Everything Now, and he's like, "What in the fuck is this?" Right? Because it's so drastically different than the other 4. I don't agree with him necessarily. I do like that album a bit more than he does, but I can understand why he got to that point, because for him, it's a 16-year saga of going through the Arcade Fire albums previously and hearing them change over time. And at the point at which they're at now, he's not happy with. Whereas someone like me, who they've only recently become one of my favorite bands, I only got into them this year in March. Mm-hmm. I have a different take on Everything Now, because I kind of ironically, I'm listening to all 5 of the albums at once without the concept of time. I listened to The Suburbs first, and then Funeral, and then Neon Bible, and it's completely out of order all at once. But it's a very different take you can have depending on when you listen to them or how many of them that you listen to.
Yeah, because it's one thing to listen to them in the correct order.
Yeah.
But it's another thing to be in the right time period as when it's coming out, because then you're experiencing things. Well, you're literally, and it's not just like, oh, I'm listening to an album from the 70s. Let me just sit and ponder, what was it like in the 70s? No, you're dated. Imagine you wake up in 1972. That album comes out in 1972. On that day, there's other music on the radio that you hear first before you get home and listen to that album. I mean, you're fully immersed in exactly what that artist was immersed in. Well, that's the game that I wonder about, is like how can you just listen to 5 albums today and then
have a true understanding of them?
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because Funeral specifically, their first album, like really struck a chord with me. Like that's probably one of my favorite records of all time now.
Yeah.
But I remember going up to my sister, my sister's 6 years older than me, so I get a lot of my music taste from her when she was my age now, and we just kind of share back and forth stuff. But she was, an angsty middle schooler when that album came out, so it really struck a chord for her. So it was funny hearing her talk about it, like from her angle, like when it came out in 2004. And then kind of laughing at me and being like, "You're just now figuring this album out?" Who the hell's talking about Funeral in 2020? Like, Pitchfork's done with it, Stereo Gum's done with it. Like, it's not a very hot button album anymore.
Right.
But it's because it's, if you follow video games, it's the Zelda Ocarina of Time of albums. It's like, what could you say about it at this point? Or like Abbey Road would be a good example too. It's like, what specific take could you say in 2020 about Abbey Road? That like right. Nobody has ever said before.
Someone be like, "Hey, you should check out my reviewing channel. I'm doing Abbey Road."
Well,
okay.
Well, it is funny actually. For April Fools, I wasn't sure what to do because I was like, I still wanted to do an actual album that I never heard before, because I wanted to keep consistency. So I actually did listen to Abbey Road. I'd never listened to that in full. I had heard like a majority of it. Just I had never like sat down technically and like front to back, because.
Wow.
I think the Beatles are a band where, like, how like you're born with the ability to kind of just, like, you don't remember when you first started speaking a language. You just kind of learned it from your parents. I feel like that's how the Beatles are for music. Like, you just, at some point.
Not for me.
Really? Well.
Okay, so it's funny that you said Abbey Road is the first album I ever listened to front to back.
Really?
I was in 8th grade, maybe 7th grade.
Mm-hmm.
My parents weren't like audiophiles of any sort. Mm. They just kind of liked some music. I kind of figured it. I'm not gonna lie. I figured out music on my own a little bit and
had to do it on your own.
And I don't know how I got into the Beatles because my parents never were. But I got my hands on. I found an Abbey Road CD in my far in my basement. It was all up to me. I was like, I've heard everybody's talking about how they know what this is. Like this is just a household name, but not in my household. So I was like, I'll check it out, and I listened to it front to back. So it's just really funny that that's the one that you didn't listen to.
Yeah,
that strikes a weird chord with me. I'm like, what?
Yeah, well, but again, like the Beatles at large, not necessarily like a front to back listen, but just the Beatles discography in general, at least in my opinion, is usually the first thing you listen to as far as like popular music. You know, if you're remotely into anything old or rock oriented or whatever, like it's the Beatles is like the first.
It's a good stepping stone.
Yeah,
where do I start? The Beatles.
Yeah, no one talks about them because they're just pretty unequivocally like great, and they're always a good starting point no matter what type you're looking for, you know.
Except I have seen a lot of flack in the past few years about the Beatles. Like just today, actually, I saw a friend of mine posted unpopular opinion. Revolver's the best Beatles album. Okay, whatever. I don't bag on anybody for liking one Beatles album better than the other. They're all great, except Please Please Me. But
that's true. That's not a great.
It's not a good one. No, not even a good one. No. I hate to say it. Anyways, that wasn't the problem. All the comments, there were tons of people who said, I don't even like the Beatles. They're overrated. I don't even like... I've been hearing that a lot. And I don't know if it's just because it's like not people who understand music that think that, like, they don't understand what the Beatles really led to, and that like or if they just, I don't know what it is.
Well, me and you have a music history perspective, so we understand like why they're as important as they are, you know, like.
But is that the reason we like them subconsciously?
No, well, not for me. For me, it's a mix of they are the most important band in music history, I think unequivocally.
Yeah.
They're one of the most approachable bands. For as zany as they got in their later years, it's not as crazy by today's standards. You can listen to Yellow Submarine or Strawberry Fields Forever or Mr. Kite, whatever you want to, and it should all be fairly approachable nowadays, but it's still unique. And especially for 50 plus years ago, by again, the most popular band in the world was doing this. This wasn't blanking on his name, Trout. This wasn't Trout Mask Replica. This wasn't, you know, Kid. Well, I guess Kid A is a bad example. Yeah, this wasn't some total underground like weird. This was the most popular band in the Western Hemisphere doing this stylistic shift in the latter half of their career, and that's one of the reasons why they're, you know, I would say music isn't objective, but in an objective sense, one of the greatest bands ever for a number of reasons, but that's a pretty big one.
I agree.
And I think it's a mix of people just genuinely don't like the Beatles. That's fair. You know, I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying statistically you probably will like some of their stuff, but some people don't. Some people are just contrarians because it's the internet and people like to just say they hate a thing that people like. You know,
that's true.
It's a mix. You know, but you can't sit here and not enjoy the Beatles because someone else doesn't, you know, like you can't let that get to you. So I don't really lose sleep at night for people being like, Sgt. Pepper isn't actually like, I don't fucking care, you know.
I hope there's not people out there that are like that.
I mean, there probably are, but I don't care. Like my favorite band is Radiohead. Radiohead is not a very approachable band, and so therefore you will get quite a lot of people who are just confused or angry or they think it's terrible. I thought it was bad when I was younger. When I was in fifth grade, my sister literally sat me down and like played me the best of Radiohead, and I was like, this is all garbage. And then I, you know, actually became an adult and developed like, you know, mental health issues and life experiences and things that would benefit to enjoying Radiohead. And
I heard Creep.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's good. And then I heard everything else, and I was like, that's not good.
For me, I was
like, wow, they're a one-hit wonder.
Yeah,
Little did I know that's their worst fucking song.
Yeah, well, for me, it was Creep, and weirdly enough, Pyramid Song, which is not their most approachable song. It's, for those of you who don't know,
it's not my favorite one.
Yeah, it's a very painfully depressing song on Amnesiac, but
Okay, hold the phone, because here it is. This is the exact proof of what I was talking about, where, maybe you have to be in the time of the music to review it correctly.
Well, I mean, Amnesia came out in 2001, and I heard it. I heard that song in like 2012 or 2013. But
sure, but what it hits us completely different. It just shows how different you can view the same person with the same everything. It's just so there's no obviously. I don't even know why we even need to talk about this. The obvious answer is it's just opinions change between time, opinions change between people, and there will always be different opinions on all music, so there's no perfect way to review music. So what is the closest we can get? That's what I wonder. So
the closest we can get is our own take,